Hello, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sue Daly. I'm Associate Director for Tech and Innovation at techUK, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first of techUK's panels at London Tech Week. This is a series of techUK talks, which we're running throughout London Tech Week, where we'll be exploring issues including skills and jobs for the future, our data-driven future and the role of data going forward, digital ethics and how important that is right now, and also technologies that are key to public sector digital transformation. So lots of sessions for you to join coming up, and all the details are on our website. But today we're here talking about emerging technologies for post-COVID recovery here in the UK, and also what comes next. What we're going to be talking about today are the emerging and transformative technologies that really are the key to rebuilding and recovering our economy and our society going forward, how digital technologies can really help, and also looking at where organizations are right now, what we've seen, what are great examples, case studies of the use of technologies, and also talking about what we might need to do or help organizations to move forward. We have got an awesome panel of tech leaders for you to listen to today and hear from. I have some questions that we're going to kick off the discussion, but then obviously if there are questions that you would like to raise, please do so using the chat function, and we can try and bring those into the conversation as we go. So first of all, I'm going to ask each of the panelists just to introduce themselves and say who they are and their roles, and then we'll kick off into what I know is going to be a fascinating conversation. So Julie, perhaps we can start with you. Could you just introduce yourself, say who you are, your role at Yoti? Thanks.
Thanks for inviting us. So my name is Julie Dawson. Our government relations, the different accreditations we go for, and our ethics.
Okay, Julie, we're losing you a little bit.
I'll just go off visual, save you that. Sue, is that better?
Go for it, Julie, and we'll see if you break up again. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, so Yoti is verifying identities of individuals and their trusted credentials online and in person. So we help with identity verification, authentication.
Okay, Julie, I think we're having a bit of technical difficulties with hearing you. You're breaking up quite a bit, so maybe while you look into that, AJ, let's move on to you. Sorry, if you could just introduce yourself, who you are, and your role at Infosys, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you techUK for inviting me to the session. My name is Ajay Bej. I run the financial services business for Infosys in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I also lead the public affairs and public sector business for Infosys in the UK, and I head what they call the UK Proximity Development Center, which is all public relations affairs for the firm in the UK.
Great, brilliant to have you here, and thank you so much for joining us. And Roger, great to have you with us also. Could you just introduce yourself and your role at Cisco, please? Thank you.
Good morning. So yeah, my name is Roger Dickinson. So I lead the UKI developer advocacy team. So my team, who are a bunch of people far more intelligent than I am, we drive the adoption of emerging technologies for our customers at Cisco. And my focus is primarily around large enterprise in the UK, but also public sector as well. And we're covering anything from things like AI, machine learning, through cloud native and automation.
Great. Well, a great a panel to really get into this topic and this discussion, really looking at what role emerging technologies can really play in what comes next and how we all move forward. So we're here today to look at the future, rebuilding and recovering our economy and our society. But it seems to me that in order to look at where we are going, we also need to look at what's happened so far and where we've come from. it's important to look at what we've already seen during this, what has been a year like no one has thought of before. I think if sorry, if you're just not on mute, if you could go on mute, that would be awesome. So during the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all still obviously going through, techUK has been working with its members, focusing on, I think, 3 kind of key themes and 3 phases. Obviously, the response to the pandemic and how technology can help with that. The adaptation, how we're adapting to this new norm for organizations and for our members, and also for businesses and the economy overall. Then, of course, the role technology can play in the rebuilding and recovering, which is what we're talking about today. But perhaps before we get there, let's just touch on what we know so far and how different technologies have been used by companies to respond and to adapt. So looking at what technologies have been crucial for businesses during COVID-19, particularly to help our organizations and our members to drive workforce and the workplace changes that we've seen long term. Perhaps let's just touch on that. And AJ, perhaps starting with you, building up that use of technologies, different technologies, has been key, right, to businesses being resilient during this crisis. But how do you think we move from the conversation from just implementing them to these new emerging technologies to scaling and building? I'm interested in what you've seen and therefore what you think may need to happen next.
So thank you. So let me just give you a bit of a backstory to this. First of all, you know, how this played out for our organization, and similar stories have been, there've been many legends across the industry on, you know, how people have coped up with this scenarios, different scenarios. So we have I mean, the landmass we covered is from Australia to North America as a firm. We have 260,000 people globally, and we have decent sized operations in China. You know, but the scale and ferocity of the problems hit us very hard. We had a whiff of all this in January itself, but the ferocity of this hit us very hard, like everybody else, and we were having a unique set of challenges. You know, in some parts of the world, we had laptop shortages, we had security issues, and we do a lot of work on client infrastructure, very data sensitive work. So they were, you know, for instance, we manage the networks and systems for a large wealth management client, which has highly sensitive data. So we had to deal with a range of issues. But the investments the firms have made in, and I'll do a bit of a generalization as well, for most firms have made an elastic infrastructure, telecommunications, and data and security has really helped us. Like I said, we had 260,000 people, and most work on client programs, which are in a very regulated industry. So we created a sort of framework initially to work on, you know, how do people get access to systems? How do you get remote access to set the firewalls in place? And often there were not many client laptops available, for example, to work remotely. So we had to set up our own firewalls to connect to client systems. So there was a framework which was created for client devices, our personal devices, to ensure that the scramble is done in a right, authentic, and secure way. So that was one. Then second, I think you've seen the trend. We've all seen this. We are a witness to this now on the collaboration tooling. I mean, imagine if COVID had hit us some 15 years back, we were in a much worse situation. So I think collaboration technologies, along with security and access technologies, have been really helpful and in a fairly enormous way. And the adoption of such tech has moved at an unprecedented pace, and I think would become the norm. And a lot of innovation is already happening in this collaboration platforms, and you will see a lot more M&A activities happening to build on the capabilities of these platforms beyond the current voice and video and file sharing formats. So that's what is the sort of a backdrop. And to your second questions on how do you sort of look at this as scale as well, right? And how do you make it as part of your work going forward? So there have been shifts in operating models in various degrees. So from completely physical to fully remote, as we've seen now, and the different levels of maturity we are measuring as organizations. And the most mature level is completely working remote, whereby you have no physical presence whatsoever. And this we have seen in companies like GitLab, which do remote working, remote development, etc., but may not apply to large enterprises. So we have a notion called anytime, anywhere, from physical 100% to almost zero, and the whole range getting covered so that the work and workforce can transition between physical and remote, between varying degrees at any time and anywhere. So that's sort of the broad layout of what we're looking at. And then there are, I mean, if you have are interested, I can give you a sort of also sense of what are the enablers from a technology standpoint, which is helping us move from physical to remote, and how this transition will happen across varying degrees going forward as well.
That's great. I think we'll definitely come into that and come on to what happens next. So let's hold that. But Roger, I was just about to bring you in anyway, but do.
I was just about to echo what AJ was saying, because it's for me, it's those three, which is collaboration, tools, security, and the cloud. And some of those go hand in hand. So if you look, you know, the platform we're on now, Cisco, we have a collaboration platform called WebEx. And because it's a cloud-based service, we've been able to scale. I think it's grown something like 4 times over the last few months, and we're doing things like 4 million calls a day. So if that had been not on a cloud base, and cloud obviously gives that flexibility where you can scale up and scale down based on demand. So we've benefited from leveraging cloud in that way, and then our customers in turn have been able to do that transition to moving across onto these collaborative platforms. But as AJ said, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, security becomes far more complex and far more of a headache, because now you've got everybody who was, 70% of your workforce now is sitting at home. They were very secure behind the company firewall where you had full control, and now they're dispersed all over the place. So security has become a paramount concern for most organizations.
And would you say, and perhaps we'll get onto this in a bit more detail, Roger, is that cloud security or security and cybersecurity as a whole? It's security across the board, so you've got to secure the individual, their identity, which we're going to be talking about, their laptop or their workstation, their data, wherever that be. And as AJ said, we're going to be moving to a hybrid model where wherever you are, you could be working from home, you could be returned to office. If we return to Starbucks, you're going to be sitting in a Starbucks. Wherever you are, you have to be secure. So the same security posture has to be available, and it follows you around wherever you are. Yeah, agreed. Well, that's a brilliant segue. Well planned already into Julie. Julie, great to have you with us. So Roger just teed that up quite nicely. It's security, it's the role, digital identity could help with this. So what is the role, looking at where we've already got to and what we've seen so far, the role digital ID has been playing, or have you been seeing organizations use this, particularly maybe from a security point of view? How has it been helping?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the key areas has been, if you look at the NHS and you look at government, so in the NHS scenario, we've had large numbers of staff coming back into the workforce, people that might not have been seen in a hospital for a while. How do you identify that as the right person with the right qualifications? So the screening element, then when they physically arrive at several different venues, to know that is the right person going in. So right to work checks and digital staff identification have been really crucial to our NHS. And going forwards, there's the additional layer of adding testing as a type of attribute. So not just who someone is, but that they have had a test with a specific result, and that result has a sensitivity, a specificity, so quite specific granular details. Also keeping contracts moving across the economy, be it an employment contract, be it business contracts, allowing the flow of logistics that has been so necessary over this last period. And for the government preventing fraud, there have been a huge number of business support grants, and government have needed to know who has been applying for what to look at that fraud prevention. So be it for government, be it in our hospitals, be it in businesses across the economy, knowing who individuals are, what they have the rights to do in person, where to go in person and where to go online is really valuable. And we're starting now to see theatres being able to open up. in our aviation and Heathrow, for example, as an airport hub, looking at how testing can support. So those are the areas that I think, and absolutely it builds upon those key elements of security, both online and in person.
Awesome. It's a very interesting area. I'm sure we'll get into what's the art of the possible as we move forward as well. But just thinking about again where we are and where we've got to. We're in September, of course, and the year so far. Just thinking about how this has changed the kind of culture and the way that your organisations work. Perhaps AJ, just to touch on you, how has the change been in your organization, your side? Do you think that this whole situation has changed the way that organizations work, that the workplace is different now? And I'm just thinking as well from a kind of IT industry point of view, of people having to learn new skills that perhaps they didn't know before to work in this new way. I'm just keen to kind of understand where organizations are right now.
Yeah, so look, I think I'll talk about two aspects of this. One is, if I were to frame it, the technology aspect, how do we deal with the situation? The second is the culture aspect, right? And the third is, how do you engage with the clients? So three aspects we look at. So from a technology standpoint, we have to adapt very rapidly in terms of, how do you make sure all your security aspects are taken care of, the data security, the access, very tricky situations in regulated industry. How do you, as a firm, look at liabilities, issues concerning security? So I think that was one aspect which was important in the beginning. Look at, for non-technical functions, we already have had access, for example, through browsers for most of the applications. But once you are outside the perimeters of an organization, and especially the client organization, which we do a lot of work for, how do you actually look at getting access, leveraging cloud security aspects in a way? So I think those aspects have been taken care of. So the security, the access piece, in the elastic infrastructure of cloud, etc. So that's one. Second is the culture piece. How do you measure ourselves from a productivity standpoint, making sure that we are accountable to the same level of productivity that we had beforehand? We get measured on, developer productivity, for example, writing code, supporting applications. So how we actually engaging with the clients in a very transparent way. So we were measuring ourselves on productivity pre-COVID and post-COVID, and we've seen that productivity has gone up in a significant way. And that's a range of things we have brought into the mix, which is around, if you're doing an agile development, how do you do daily stand-ups? How do you actually engage more with the clients, do more transparent, stand-ups on a daily basis? That's one. Second is about how do you actually look at the aspect of learning and, enhancing our own skills in these sort of times. So we are focusing a lot on remote learning, remote education, and providing the sort of technologies and platforms to our employees and also our customers in terms of, providing new skills and capabilities which will be relevant for today's day and age and the new technology which are coming forth. So that's, I think, those three aspects. But from a most important thing and most appreciative, the clients have been largely on the productivity side. That companies like us have really focused on productivity, and with all this security, culture, and client access issues, I think shaped up well for us so far.
No, it's fascinating. We had a conversation a couple of months ago now, which is probably still on our techUK's website, around training in this new world. And actually, and perhaps we'll touch on this and then when we look forward and ahead, the role that technologies like AR and VR can play to helping people train or train for new working environments, new environments that are going to feel different, or learn a new skill while they are still at home, which they can then apply when they get back to work. So some great examples there of emerging technologies that are being used in different ways, and perhaps we'll come on to that in a minute. But Roger, if I can ask you, I was just keen from a kind of technical point of view, from a IT professionals, IT industry, whether this, and particularly the move to cloud, has increased the requirements of IT professionals, or have they had to have you and your teams had to learn new skills, or has there been a change in the way that technically the IT profession is working given the shift?
Yeah, I think so. From a cloud perspective, well, Cisco traditionally we've been an infrastructure company, which is very much about on-premise, and our traditional stakeholders are very focused around those kind of technology stacks. Now, when you shift to cloud, the processes and the way you consume and you build out infrastructures there is very different. It's a very different kind of skill sets. And Cisco and a lot of our customers are already on this journey already, where we start looking at, okay, how do we consume infrastructure in a programmatic fashion? And from a skilling perspective, you're starting to use tools that are non-traditional, tooling that they're used to. Maybe you need to learn coding. How do you code against an API to actually bring up some infrastructure? So again, this situation has actually accelerated a lot of our customers as they've moved their applications or built new applications on the cloud to meet immediate requirements. Their IT professionals, their network engineers, their sysadmins have had to very rapidly, if they weren't already there, start consuming these new skills and learning these new skills. So, part of our role during this pandemic has been, because I'm in the sales function, and then what happened was, obviously, when everything hit, sales kind of stopped, as you would expect, because a lot of customers were just getting themselves ready and sorting everything else out. And then what's happened is we've now started moving in where customers are starting to say, okay, we've refocused now and reprioritized what we need to do. And now they're investing, but those investments have changed significantly for what they were or what they were going to be at the start of the year. And they're now investing a lot more in things like multi-cloud and being how to deliver consistent enterprise services across multiple clouds. So they get the best of all these different clouds, plus what a lot of their data is still sitting on premise. So they have to now operationalize all of these new targets. And that takes a huge set of new procedures, processes, skills, and culture. And that's one of the hardest things, is a cultural change. Now, we saw this historically with, if you're familiar with DevOps was a big cultural shift, and IT ops are really going through this same kind of cultural shift now, where you move from a culture of fear, where we don't want to touch anything because it might break, because infrastructure has been traditionally fragile in that way, to you do a lot of changes, small incremental changes on a daily basis. So that's one of the biggest challenges. But it's again, and I'll continue to use this. The COVID has accelerated the adoption of these kind of technologies and processes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one article I saw was 2 years worth of digital acceleration in 2 months. We saw. Julie, does it feel like that to you? I mean, has it really kind of taken off and in a way that you haven't seen before? I know you and I and others have obviously been in this industry for some time now. It feels different to me, right?
Absolutely. I think there's 2 key areas really. So one, I think in our personal worlds, we're all doing a huge amount more of online ordering and sort of self-service. And there were some ramifications there I'll talk through. And then in our business lives, companies haven't been able to do the same approaches of meeting in person, interviewing new staff in person, and that also has changed behaviours. So in our personal lives, I think what we're seeing is this huge increase in terms of looking at how things are done online and looking at the streamlining of onboarding of customers and ordering. And in the digital age checking area, that has seen quite a few really interesting challenges for businesses, looking at how do we have the same respect in terms of looking at age checking of customers, and how do we do that digitally and do that on the doorstep, as well as how we previously used to do it in person. And if you look at things like the changes for right to work checks, the Home Office and the departments looking at right to work checking decided you have to be able to do this in a much more streamlined way. And the hope is that organisations will be able to carry on with these gains, because frankly, we are not equipped to check documents in person from over 200 countries around the world. And unless staff have really in-depth border control level training, they're not really equipped to do that. So lots of people have been realizing that some of those old processes were actually quite theatrical. The financial services world had already realized that you needed to be able to do digital checks and use AI, embrace different approaches to look at the amount of fraudulent vectors that could come into the checks around financial services. And similarly, in the recruitment world, people are now seeing there are huge gains from not doing in-person checks, not just the lack of contact and contagion, the time, but also the security element. And those are the ones now that we need to see continue going forwards into our everyday lives, hopefully post-COVID.
Absolutely. And this is the point now where I sit here and worry that my doorbell is about to go and some Amazon or other delivery is about to arrive and I have to run off. Don't worry, I don't believe I've been ordering anything recently, so I think we're safe. But it's I think what I take from that is in terms of if we look at where we've been so far, the journey so far, as it were, it's really a story of digital acceleration. It's really a story of organizations using the tools and technologies that we have right now to as AJ said, to respond to customers, to move forward, to increase productivity, to keep everything moving and going, which has been amazing. Perhaps now we look at what the future may hold and what comes next and how we move forward. And I'm thinking here about the emerging and transformative technologies, the innovations that could really be crucial for rebuilding, recovering from where we are right now, looking at where we are going, and that could become part of our everyday life post-COVID. And also, of course, to help reopen and recover and rebuild our economy and our society. So looking at those, what the future may hold, it's time to maybe get out our crystal ball and think about this a little bit. AJ, perhaps we'll come to you first. I'm keen to get your views on what are the emerging technologies that you guys are looking at, Emphasis and obviously the industry as a whole, that are going to be really key to moving forward, and maybe any examples or case studies that you've already seen that have really stood out for you in terms of the use of emerging technologies in the kind of post-COVID recovery.
Yeah, look, I think if again, there are many technologies, which are, and I read somewhere that COVID has accelerated digital transformation by 5 years, not 2 years, but
wow,
different story. But it actually feels like that as well. And so look, there are big investments happening on security will be a very, very key topic for sure going forward. We have a concept called zero trust networks now coming in, and that's going to enable companies to feel more secure. So far what we've seen is as long as you enter the perimeters of the organization, you cross the firewall, you have access to pretty much everything. So all these hyperscalers, the cloud providers, are working on something called zero trust networks, that any information which flows inside and outside of the networks is not trusted at all. So you're using a lot of AI machine learning in that aspect. That's one. Second, we're going to be seeing a huge amount of innovation, and I think it'll really fuel tremendous innovation on the collaboration tooling perspective. Because as you work on remotely, at the moment, the Zooms and the, pretty much all platforms are limited in the scope. So we're seeing a lot of infusion of AI, machine learning, VR, AR in those platforms now. So something which we have created as a firm platform called Meridian, which is these platforms plus, which actually gives you a sense of if, for example, you and I are talking, how engaged you are. Okay, looking at your behavior, looking at your biometrics, looking at the way you are engaging and moving your body. So that's one. Then you can have breakout session. You can have large conferences. I mean, we had our own 3,000 people annual general meeting on a platform, the Meridian platform. Then looking at access to all internal applications. How can you actually just use the browser to, we guys as business and marketing functions, HR people, anyway, using the browser technology in a big way. How do you actually develop code on cloud? Okay, which Roger was talking about. And that's the concept of zero trust security coming. Then I think digital identity will be a huge focus. I mean, we've seen digital identity as a focus from a nation state perspective, which is happening in emerging markets. but you will start seeing this actually the benefits of that in the enterprises. So we have some examples on, I can build on that. And last is, I think, from the acceleration standpoint, you're seeing a huge amount of, innovation happening in healthcare, automotive selling, education in a big way, and field operations. So there's a range of, innovations actually happening, and we build on those examples going forward. But I thought I'll give you a sense of, so one is the security aspect, the whole access, the cloud infrastructure piece. Then second is of the digital identity. We'll see a big innovation happening, the collaboration tooling and platforms, and then use cases within the industry in healthcare, automotive, education, field operations, and financial services.
Yeah, that's a really key point, because it's not just the technologies, it's the sectors and the industries where these technologies could really play a key role. And perhaps we can come on to that. It'd be great to kind of get a sense of maybe which sectors and industries are getting this, are understanding the role, and even from an industry point of view, what we could do to help those sectors that aren't yet, to bring them along on this journey. Perhaps we can touch on that as we go forward. Roger, I know you're very much at the coalface, very much working at a technical with the customer level. Keen to understand, from your point of view, what examples, what case studies have really stood out for you in terms of the use of technologies and the approach that's been taken, and what you think that will mean for as we move forward.
Yeah, so again, similar to what AJ was saying about the next iteration of collaboration tools. So that's been driven, at high velocity at the moment. And I was thinking, as an example, a few years ago when we first brought out like biometrics on the phone, and you could use your thumb, your fingerprint to open your phone up. I remember my nephew saying to me, because I was putting in a 6-digit passcode, and he says, "I can't believe you're putting in a passcode." And I said, "Listen, I don't mind spending 3 seconds typing in the passcode. But now you would never do that, right? It would be one of the biggest annoyances if you had to put in a 6-digit passcode." And it's, if you think of our collaboration tools now, how many times have you said, "Oh, sorry, I was on mute," or if you're sharing, "Can you see my screen?" Right? So these are the kind of innovations, or albeit they're incremental small things, which are going to come to these kind of platforms. So you just do a gesture to come off mute. You don't have to hit a button. You will see if you're sharing or not. And why would you ever take notes when you can get a full transcript of the conversation automatically in whatever language you want? So this is where collaboration tooling is going, and it'll be a much more of an integrated experience with the applications you're using, whether you're doing whiteboarding, and we said about things like AR and VR is coming in there. Some of the stuff we've done, some of the projects to help customers with the adoption of collaboration platforms, we built an AI chatbot, which was using Watson AI in the background. So if you were trying to use Cisco WebEx, how do I do this? How do I do that? It was actually, you were talking to a bot who was then, finding your answers for you using AI. And we did a lot of it. My team did a lot of integration work like this. We worked with a Premiership football club to build watch parties, so that, because you can't go to a football ground before the game starts, you can create a watch party similar to over, and you can discuss what's going on, latest transfers. And they built that into their applications, so onto their web pages. And again, these kind of, the adoption of these kind of apps and integrations, we just didn't used to do them this fast. We used to go into proof of concepts and prolonged engagements, whereas the chatbot I was talking about, we're talking days, if not like a couple of weeks, to actually have it going into production. And this just shows that our customers are embracing and adopting these technologies far quicker. And this is the new, we talk about the new normal. This is the new normal of the expectations customers have on vendors like Cisco and companies like Infosys, where they expect you to work this fast going forward. And that's not something we're going to have the luxury of. We're not going to fall back to weeks and months long engagements going forward.
That's fascinating. And I think it's important to remember, right? We were talking about, our economic recovery, but it's also our societal recovery. How are we getting society back? How do we get people back to doing what they love, not just in the work, but obviously in sport as well. And we've had a question actually around the B2C market and what are consumers leveraging in the consumer side. And perhaps, Julie, that might be a good segue into you in terms of, obviously, you know, you're coming at this from a digital identity. So when we ask the question, what are the emerging technologies that are really going to be key to moving us forward? A digital ID is right there, right? So what comes next? What is the possibility that digital ID could really help us moving forward? And perhaps from a consumer point of view, as well as from a business point of view, you know, what could we see if we really embrace this and move forward?
Well, I think one of the interesting areas we've seen is the development of verified profiles and different safeguarding tools. So if you look on a global basis, in many countries, over 20 to 25% of users are under the age of 18. So how do you treat people differently and in an age-appropriate fashion? In the UK this next year, we're just starting on the journey with the age-appropriate design code. And many countries around the world are looking at this and thinking, what are the areas where we need to treat people differently, either because they're young or they have some other vulnerability? So I think that is a key area. And that could be on a social media platform, having a verified profile that just knows that you are over the age of 18 and maybe nothing more. Same on a dating platform or on a gaming platform, with an age-appropriate level of interaction. And that could be done simply with an age estimation algorithm. And there are examples of those, such as Yoti's one, which basically works across gender, across skin tone. And I think one of the areas that we in the Biometrics Institute have worked a lot on is the transparency. Organisations can show transparently how good their different algorithms are, explain how they work across genders, across skin tone, and show the degree of accuracy, the false negatives, the false positives, show under the hood and invite in scrutiny. So I'd say definitely that online area of the social media dating. In the EdTech area, there's going to be a lot more remote proctoring required to know that that is the right person receiving an exam result. And looking across at other areas such as retail, we're seeing increasing numbers of organisations wanting different forms of self-service. That could be drive-throughs, it could be pick-up boxes. That again, you need to know that somebody is of the right age to access those different goods and services. So there's many different areas, I'd say, going forwards in the retail world, where the age element is important, and in the social media and wider dating gaming, having other protections and looking at different forms of AI and different forms of moderation to ensure that we have wider levels of protection for the vulnerable online. Accessibility, be that people with disabilities, without documents, is then important, and hence elements such as age estimation can help that over 1 billion people in the world that do not have a root identity document to prove age. And there'll be other proxies going forwards that help people build up a track record of existing. Could be that you've given blood, or it could be that you have done, for example, in the UK, the National Citizenship Service, but you might not have a passport or driving license. So looking at other forms of knowledge that can build up your activity history and enable you to have a credential to then participate in civic life, in economic life. And to be clear, next year in the UK, we have the PSBAR coming in June. So it's really important that across industry, and techUK is helping in this, there's a lot of focus on that accessibility and looking at how people with different disabilities can access, and also that we look at interoperability. So in the health credentials area, working with WC3 health credentials is another area which is important for organisations to look at to ensure that the least number of possible people are left behind. We have to address all of those different angles.
Yeah, a real enabler of inclusion, right? And that's key on everyone's agenda right now. How do we bring everybody with us on this journey? And particularly when we talk about, and all three of you talked about artificial intelligence, AI, and obviously there are other technologies, of course, but when I think about AI, when I think about, and we see huge potential and opportunities, as I'm sure we all do around AI, we also need to be mindful that this is really exciting to all of us. It's really exciting to me and to you guys, I'm sure, but they're also not so exciting for others. And there's an important point about bringing people, bringing everybody on this journey with us, right? How do we get this right in terms of building trust and confidence around all these emerging technologies, particularly artificial intelligence, as we go forward? How do we navigate some really key issues, you know, privacy issues, consent issues, questions around that when deploying these emerging technologies? AJ, just from your point of view, and obviously you've got a wider role than just looking at the UK, how do we, from your point of view, or what do you think is key to navigating this and bringing people on this journey and building that trust and confidence, which we're going to need, right? You could develop emerging technologies and deploy them, adopt them, but unless people use them and have trust and confidence in using them, we won't see the full benefits, right? So how do we make sure we bring people with us as an industry on this important next step?
So I think Julie mentioned a very interesting point on the digital identity piece. I think that's a huge amount of AI machine learning which will be there, and education will be a very important factor in scaling this up, right? What is the transparency behind the algorithms? How much information is being shared? I'll give you an example of just take the case of digital identity and related to the enterprise. So, you know, once we look at access to systems and information, we typically focus on the multi-factor authentication. And if you're using different applications, different cloud providers, because you'll be working across clouds now, you will have to have a concept of virtual identity. So essentially meaning the aliases or proxies that you can be using for your information. So people should be educated that we're not sharing all your information. So digital identity will absolutely help in that case. A case in point is corporate gifts, for example. You know, when we as a firm are gifting our employees some vouchers or something, the platform would actually need pretty much all information, you know, your date of birth, your address, everything, just to authenticate. With this digital identity, you just have aliases now, and there are standards which are coming up in this area called open ID, which is important. Second is the concept of data fiduciaries. When you have the consent and data is an important intertwined sort of concept, right? So data fiduciary is, I'll take an example for what is happening in Asia. So you have the unique identity program at population scale there. You have 1.3 billion people who didn't have, you know, who had partial identity in 2008. Now almost pretty much everybody has. That has led to massive financial inclusion, but also came up with, you know, the whole concept of, you know, opacity on data, your information sharing. So we have, in India, at least, especially what they've done is a concept of data fiduciary, which is an independent body which holds all your data and based on your consent only provides data to different stakeholders, different enterprises. And you can, for example, if you're applying for an insurance or a loan or a mortgage, that data fiduciary acts as on your behalf, so that there is a checks and guardrails available around that. I think that's one area. Second is whatever you're doing from a use case perspective, we have to talk about what is sitting behind that, how much information is being taken, how it will be used. I think those sort of things. And one thing which will really drive the adoption is on specific industry use cases. I think that is what is really important, that we have, you know, pointed use cases within industries, which I mentioned about earlier: healthcare, life sciences, financial services, manufacturing, auto. So those are the sort of things would be important, Sue.
No, absolutely. Education. Julie, I'm sure you would agree from the UK point of view, it's education, but it's also talking about these issues and I suppose showing as an industry that these issues are important and that, you know, work is being done to look at how we address, how do we get this right?
Absolutely. And I think there, Sue, there's been some tremendous work done on the trust framework, both here in the UK with the Digital Identity Unit working closely with Open Identity Exchange, If you look at Canada, the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, and also now coming forwards in New Zealand, you're seeing a similar public and private sector approach to a trust framework around digital identity. And across the board, they have some really common principles. And I like that fiduciary mention. AJ, you had a similar thing, but it's looking at privacy, transparency, inclusivity, interoperability, proportionality, and good governance. And those are the key principles that I think are very much at the heart across the digital identity landscape. So we take part in the World Economic Forum's group of digital identity innovators, and the exact same dialogues are going across providers globally, looking at how people can make their approaches interoperable, be it OpenID Connect, be it WC3, and based on these same principles. So I have great optimism for the approaches, and I think it can make that strong GDP impact that our economies are going to need, which, you know, are stated to be sort of 3 to 8% of GDP impact when you're starting to see a high penetration. The states of Jersey at the moment has a 45% penetration of digital ID, and there, through our work with them, that's starting to really help streamlining of costs for government and an impact for private sector and a cutting down of fraud. So those are the types of gains, be it in the property landscape, financial services, health, and overall business onboarding and streamlining.
Yeah, huge benefits to be, or huge potential here of these technologies. But Roger, again, it's that comes back to trust and confidence. Where do you think customers, or where do you see the people that you interact with are? Do you think that they're much more in a better place now, given the acceleration of digital transformation we've seen in terms of moving forward? Do you think we're in a different place now in terms of going ahead on the, you know, is it becoming a technical issue? Is it a cultural issue? What do you see as, how do we get more people trusting and having confidence in these technologies as we move forward?
So from a pure technical viewpoint, it's a very exciting time. But as we just discussed, it's very important that, as you know, particularly AI is underpinning a lot of these new solutions, that there is that trust and that regulation which sits behind it. Because as people move into, even just like going into retail spaces now, a lot of new or existing intelligent camera systems are being put in place. And I had an example of this yesterday. You know, a few weeks ago, I filled my car with petrol and went in to pay for it, and there was a member of staff standing on the door, you know, controlling how many people were in the space. As I went in yesterday, they've got an automated traffic light system, so you can go and you can go out based on counting how many people are in the space and using their camera infrastructure. And we're going to see a lot more of that, particularly when you start looking at spaces, you know, whether it's a retail space or whether it's a university space we spoke about earlier. A lot of universities have got this term now, this elastic campus, where they're going to have this hybrid of physical experience and virtual experience. But when you're physically in these spaces, we're going to be using technology to actually say, okay, is social distancing? What's the actual capacity? Signaling to people that a density of people in a certain space has been reached. And this is, all of these technologies are underpinned by those infrastructures, but also AI, which is doing all the legwork behind it. So it's imperative that, yes, we can do it, and we've got the technology to do it, but it's got to be employed in a manner where you've got the trust of the organisation and your customers which are coming into that space.
So just thinking about the UK's recovery, rebuilding as we move forward, obviously a key topic at the moment from industry, but also from government, and looking for the UK government's point of view. I'm just interested in the panel's views on whether you think the pandemic could lead to reprioritization of investment by government in digital. What do you see the signs are that we could see more government investment? Government are seeing digital as key to our recovery and what comes next. I don't know if anybody has a view or would like to take that, or what do they see as the kind of direction of travel from government in terms of digital?
It's interesting you use the term direction of travel, because again, another accelerated project, something that we're working with, is the rail networks. And talking about the inclusivity, those rail corridors touch a lot of rural areas which don't have, you know, broadband, high-speed broadband or 5G. And but what these the network, the rail providers are looking at, they've got a lot of capacity, fiber capacity. So we're working with a number of these companies to actually provide connectivity to these rural areas in those rail corridors. And that's as more and more people have shifted to working from home, that becomes far more of a priority now, that you can actually get high speed internet access into all these different communities. And so that's one example of and that's obviously a potentially a critical national infrastructure project, which can be accelerated to provide inclusivity and accelerate the economy back in post-COVID.
Yeah, it's a great example. Julie,
yeah, so I think we've seen some encouraging signs that the government is starting to have some cross-departmental working with digital identity, and we really hope that that is a very much stronger and more accelerated journey going forwards, because the key government departments, be that DVLA, DWP, HMRC, have to be on the same page and working together. And the legislative calendar has to make time for the parity of acceptance of digital forms of identification with the old paper-based ones, which we know were pretty much theatrical. But through Brexit and through the last period, there hasn't been much time to make some small but really significant legislative changes. And what we're looking for is that calendar of those changes. We understand that the Verify programme ought to be changing next year, but to have a healthy ecosystem, you need places, frankly, for people to be able to use their digital identity to prove age or identity or credentials going forward. So we're hopeful, but we really need to see that calendar and that joined up working across different government agencies going forwards.
AJ, anything from your side on this?
I'll put from a different lens completely, which is on, we need to reskill and restart the economy. Okay, there is industries which have been completely decimated, or I mean, it's a strong word, but will never come back to the same shape and form, and there'll be job redundancies in at scale, right? In those, I mean, if you look at travel, hospitality, these have been damaged for a long time. Stores. So I think we have to focus on, and we're doing something very similar, and we're going to be presenting to the UK government also. How do you reskill and restart the economy? So we have a concept of forming consortiums which people can match demand and supply, especially for blue collar workers, and looking at vocational and tech trainings for them. We are looking at partnership with one of the largest universities in the UK, which is already operating on a remote platform, and then bringing a consortium of other players as well, where we match the demand and supply of skilled labor and fill the gap, bridge the gaps, and from an education and reskilling standpoint in between. We've successfully launched this program in the US, where we're working with community colleges, job platforms, and which host jobs and opportunities, so that we can bring the pull and the push together. So that's one way we are looking at, and then we acting as in a platform provider to drive the education and reskilling of those workforces, and see based on their interest levels how much they can actually learn technologies or certain vocations to bridge that gap. But I think it'll be long haul. We have to focus and pivot towards reskilling, re-education, and move away from degrees to skills as a concept. That's what we are focusing on as a firm, and we'll be pushing this heavy, and we're looking for collaboration partners in this space in the UK. And I think they'll be really impactful if we can bring that perspective beyond technology to people where it really matters.
Yeah, it's absolutely such a key issue, the reskilling and the retraining, making sure people have the skills that they need for, the jobs of the future, but also the jobs of today, right? And how we're moving forward. And we've got a techUK talks panel on jobs and skills of the future coming up, I believe next week. So it's a key issue that we're working on at techUK with our members and with stakeholders. It's really important that we get that right. So we're coming to the end of our time, unfortunately. I always am amazed how quickly these hours go, because there's so much we could talk about, and this has been fascinating. I don't have any more questions in the chat, so I've got a final question to kind of maybe wrap things up. Some final thoughts from all of you, and this has been such a fascinating conversation. We've talked throughout today around acceleration and digital adoption, digital deployment, digital take-up, and what we've seen. So I'm thinking, we're talking about the future. How do we make sure we don't regress, or how do we make sure that we keep, to think more positively, keep that innovation, keep that adoption, deployment, keep that take up of digital technologies, that digital acceleration of transformation that we've seen? How do we keep that moving forward as the economy starts to reopen, as we start to live in this new world that we're all living in right now? What do you all think? And I suppose, kind of last thoughts, what would you like to see, or what do you think is key to us moving forward and keeping that digital transformation going? Perhaps, Roger, go to you first.
I think the phrase was necessity is mother of invention, and we've seen that incredibly over the last number of months. But I think what has happened is these are the new expectations. There's a new, for business and consumers, there's a new set of expectations. So the bar's been raised, and it's a bit like Pandora's, but it's out there now, so it's not going to go back. So I've spoken about the velocity and the speed at which organizations are adopting new technologies, and I don't think that's going to fall back, because this has been like the positive side of COVID. It's been an opportunity to test things that they would never have tried because it's been so high risk, but they had no choice. And now they've proven so many new models and business models that I don't think it will fall back. But I actually think it's more of a platform now that we can actually build on going forward. So actually, it's a huge opportunity for a lot of businesses going forward.
Absolutely. Julie?
I'd just say the one word, transparency, is what we as companies, but also government, needs to focus on. I've been fortunate this year to work with the Ada Lovelace Citizens Biometrics Council and hear ordinary people's feelings and concerns and hopes about many different forms of biometric technology. Be it someone in a supermarket at the moment, a member of staff wearing a body-worn camera because of concerns about abuse in stores from customers, through to people being able to self-serve, and to explain to people why these technologies are being deployed, to give the transparency as to how accurate they are, why they're being used, and to invite in ethical scrutiny is important for businesses to undertake. But for government, it's really important also to bring businesses with them and to explain, for example, with digital identity, what is the timeline, what is happening as when, what are the log jams. And that, I think, would help consumer faith as well as business faith, and then investment, which then becomes a virtual circle.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. And I'm sure the ethical issues, you're absolutely right. The Ada Lovelace Institute's doing some great work. We work very closely with them as well. Digital ethics in 2020, what we've learned so far is a techUK talks panel next week. So I'm sure those issues will be discussed more there, but great. And AJ, last word to you really, in terms of what you think needs to happen next to keep the momentum.
I think, look, I'll again take the view on people who will be left out. I think there is people like the white collar workers, people like us. I think we've seen the boom and the flexibility which is being offered, and you've seen the explosive growth happening in tech and the budgets being reoriented towards tech in most of the enterprises. I think it's the thing of how do you make sure inclusive growth happens is something we need to focus and address, because while the technology challenges can be addressed, if you leave a large swath of the population not included in the growth or in the new economy, I think we'll suffer. So I think reskilling, re-education, those aspects will be becoming even more crucial now as we progress in this digital age.
Absolutely. We have to bring everybody with us on this next phase of where we all are right now. Well, look, it's 12 o'clock. We've come to the end of our hour. I hope you've all found that fascinating. I've thoroughly enjoyed that conversation, and we could go on for longer, but unfortunately our time is up. Thank you so much for all your insights and for just exploring what is such a fascinating time right now, looking at where we've come from, what we've seen in terms of the acceleration of digital transformation, adoption of emerging technologies, but also what's going to happen next and how do we get this right, not just for our economy, our society, but for everybody. So thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, AJ. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Roger, for being amazing panel. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. There's more to come, as I said. Check out the techUK website for all the techUK talks you can join over during London Tech Week. Again, I've been Sue Daly for techUK. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.